In the grim shadows of medieval Europe, justice was a concept often twisted by fear and absolute power. Confession, often deemed the mother of truth, became the ultimate prize, extracted through unspeakable methods. From the somber halls of the Inquisition to the local lord's dungeon, instruments of agony were perfected. These weren't merely tools, they were psychological weapons designed to break the human spirit and body. Their purpose was clear: control, punishment, and the ruthless enforcement of power through fear. The rack, perhaps the most infamous device, embodied the era's cruel ingenuity, promising absolute physical dissolution. The victim, often stripped bare, would be bound to the sturdy wooden frame, wrists secured to one roller, ankles to another. With each slow turn of the ratchet, the body stretched, joints groaned, and muscles tore, a symphony of escalating agony. The rack's relentless pull could dislocate limbs, rip muscles from bones, and even pull the victim apart, forcing a confession through unimaginable suffering. It was a calculated form of torture, designed not for swift death, but for a prolonged, excruciating unraveling of the human frame, leaving shattered bodies and broken spirits in its wake. The psychological terror of witnessing another on the rack, or imagining oneself there, was a potent deterrent against dissent. Another method, the strappado, offered a different kind of crushing pain, often executed publicly for maximum psychological impact. This device involved tying the victim's hands behind their back, hoisting them high into the air by a rope attached to their wrists, and then dropping them suddenly. The excruciating jerk would dislocate shoulders, tear muscles, and sometimes even rip the arms clean from the sockets, leaving them to hang in agony for hours. Sometimes weights were added to the victim's feet, intensifying the torment and ensuring a swift and agonizing dislocation of every major joint in the upper body. This prolonged agony, hanging helplessly, unable to relieve the pressure, was a cruel psychological game as much as a physical one. The fear of suffocation and the burning pain in the shoulders and chest would eventually break even the strongest wills, leading to desperate confessions. The Iron Maiden, though largely a mythologized device, captures the chilling imagination of medieval brutality with its spiked embrace. While no historically proven Iron Maiden from the medieval period exists, the concept of a spiked sarcophagus speaks volumes about the human capacity for imagining cruelty. Its legend reflects the era's fascination with slow, agonizing death and the terror of being enclosed with instruments of pain, slowly pierced until death. Its terrifying imagery, a human-shaped cabinet lined with razor-sharp spikes, would slowly close upon its victim. The spikes were strategically placed to avoid vital organs, ensuring a prolonged and agonizing death by puncture wounds and blood loss, maximizing terror and suffering. This fictional device's enduring legacy underscores the fear that authorities could wield such ultimate and inescapable punishment, a grim symbol of medieval cruelty. The breaking wheel, or Catherine wheel, was a truly horrific public spectacle, intended to serve as a stark warning to all who witnessed it. Condemned individuals were stretched and tied to a large wooden wagon wheel, their limbs strategically positioned over gaps between spokes. With each swing of a heavy iron club, bones were systematically crushed, one by one, a slow and agonizing process of dismemberment without actual dismemberment. The cries of the victim would fill the town square, a brutal symphony of justice. After their bones were shattered, the broken body was often left on the wheel, hoisted aloft for days, to be devoured by birds and exposed to the elements. This post-mortem display served as a potent, gruesome reminder of the consequences of defying authority, a public performance of absolute power. The stench of death and the sight of the decaying body reinforced the terror, ensuring that the lesson was etched into the minds of the populace. It was a complete annihilation of dignity, even after death. The pair of anguish, a grotesque device, was inserted into bodily orifices and slowly expanded, causing internal rupture and excruciating pain. While its historical use as a torture device is debated, its existence in historical texts and illustrations reflects the dark inventiveness attributed to torturers. The psychological terror of such an invasive and painful instrument, targeting the most vulnerable parts of the body, was undeniable. It was a tool of ultimate humiliation and suffering, designed to instill absolute submission and break the victim's will through unspeakable internal agony. Water torture, in its various forms, was a common and insidious method, leaving no external marks but inflicting immense suffering and the terror of drowning. Victims could be forced to drink gallons of water until their stomachs burst, or subjected to repeated controlled drownings. The constant threat of suffocation, the burning sensation in the lungs, and the overwhelming feeling of helplessness made it a profoundly terrifying experience. It was a cunning form of torture, allowing interrogators to claim no physical harm, while driving victims to the brink of death and insanity through pure psychological and internal physical trauma. The Judas cradle forced victims to sit atop a pyramid-shaped seat, with the sharp point slowly impaling their perineum as weights were applied. This slow, agonizing penetration, tearing flesh and muscles over hours or even days, was designed to extract confessions or simply inflict prolonged suffering. The extreme tension on the legs, trying to avoid the piercing point, coupled with the inevitable, agonizing penetration, made it a truly diabolical device. It combined physical pain, humiliation, and the constant psychological dread of imminent, irreversible damage, ensuring a complete collapse of resistance. Thumbscrews and leg vices were employed to crush fingers, toes, and limbs, causing excruciating pain and permanent disfigurement. These devices slowly applied increasing pressure, shattering bones and pulpifying flesh, turning extremities into mangled messes. The gradual, inescapable pressure, building to an unbearable crescendo, was a horrifying psychological torment as much as a physical one. They were particularly effective for obtaining signatures on confessions, as the pain was localized and could be precisely controlled, forcing compliance through the threat of irreversible damage. The heretic's fork was a menacing two-pronged fork, worn under the chin and strapped around the neck, preventing the victim from lying down or sleeping. Every nod of the head, a natural instinct when exhausted, would result in the spikes piercing the chin and sternum, ensuring prolonged waking agony. Designed to punish heresy and extract confessions through sleep deprivation and constant physical discomfort, it forced victims into a perpetual state of strained wakefulness. This constant, low-level torture, combined with the extreme mental fatigue, would eventually break a person's resolve, making them desperate for any relief, even if it meant confessing to false accusations. Scavenger's daughter, a lesser-known but equally brutal device, was the inverse of the rack, designed to compress the body rather than stretch it. The victim was forced into a crouching position, with their head and feet bound together by an iron frame, slowly crushing their spine and ribs. This excruciating compression caused internal organs to rupture, bones to crack, and blood to flow from every orifice, a truly horrifying experience. The intense claustrophobia combined with the crushing pressure made it a short path to agonizing death or permanent disfigurement, a testament to the medieval imagination for pain. The iron chair, often fitted with spikes and heated from below, was a slow burn of torment, literally. Prisoners were strapped naked to the chair, the internal heat causing agonizing burns while the spikes slowly pierced their flesh. The combination of intense heat, immobility, and piercing pain ensured a confession or a slow, agonizing death. The torturer could control the temperature, escalating the suffering at will, turning the chair into a literal crucible of human despair and a horrifying demonstration of total control over another's body. Branding with hot irons was a common form of public punishment and identification, marking criminals for life with searing pain. The agonizing sizzle of flesh, the stench of burning skin, and the permanent scar served as a constant reminder of their transgression and their subjugation. Often performed in crowded squares, it was a ritualistic humiliation, stripping the condemned of their anonymity and permanently altering their identity. This public act of marking not only inflicted immediate physical pain, but also carried a profound psychological burden, ensuring societal ostracization for the remainder of their existence. The practice of disembowelment, particularly heinous, involved the removal of intestines while the victim was still alive, a slow and agonizing death. This brutal punishment was often reserved for traitors or those who committed the most grievous crimes, meant to demonstrate the ultimate penalty for betrayal. The sheer shock, pain, and horror of seeing one's own organs extracted, coupled with the slow bleed-out, made it one of the most feared and gruesome methods of execution. It was a terrifying spectacle, designed to break all notions of human dignity and serve as an absolute warning against challenging authority, a truly medieval form of visceral revenge. Impalement, a method of torture and execution dating back to ancient times, saw a resurgence in medieval Europe, particularly favored for its prolonged and agonizing death. Victims were forced onto a sharpened stake, which would slowly pierce their body, often emerging through the mouth or shoulder. The agonizing descent, sometimes lasting for days, caused immense internal bleeding and organ damage, ensuring a slow, horrific demise. This public display of suffering was an extreme deterrent, broadcasting a message of absolute, unforgiving power to all who dared defy the ruling elite, an act of pure terror designed to break societies. The Spanish spider, or breast ripper, was a tool of particular horror, used almost exclusively on women accused of witchcraft or other heinous crimes. This claw-like device, often heated, would be used to slowly tear and mutilate the breasts, causing unimaginable pain and permanent disfigurement. The psychological terror, the public humiliation, and the physical agony made it a brutal instrument of patriarchal control and a stark warning against defying societal norms. It was a tool designed to break women in the most visceral and degrading way possible, an ultimate act of subjugation. The gibbet was less a torture device and more a prolonged, agonizing form of public execution and post-mortem display. Condemned individuals were often left to die of exposure, starvation, or thirst within an iron cage, hung high for all to see. Their decaying bodies remained as macabre warnings, slowly decomposing in the elements, a constant, horrifying spectacle for weeks or months. It was a cruel form of death, designed for maximum visibility and deterrence, stripping the victim of all dignity in life and death, turning them into a symbol of absolute state power. Garroting, particularly common in Spain, involved strangulation using a metal collar tightened around the neck, often with a spike piercing the spine. This device, sometimes augmented with a screw to slowly crush the neck, ensured a slow and excruciating death, sometimes taking many minutes to complete. It was a calculated form of execution, designed to inflict maximum terror and suffering before death, making it a terrifying public spectacle. The final moments were often marked by violent convulsions and the silent pleas for mercy, witnessed by a somber crowd, underscoring the finality of medieval justice. The pillory and stocks were instruments of public humiliation and minor torture, exposing victims to the elements and the scorn of the populace. Though not as lethal as other devices, the prolonged exposure, coupled with public mockery and physical abuse from thrown refuse, could be deeply traumatizing. These devices were often used for petty crimes or social transgressions, serving as a powerful deterrent by shaming individuals and making them a target for public anger. The psychological damage from such a public spectacle could be lasting, stripping individuals of their dignity and social standing. Flagellation, or whipping, was a common punishment, inflicted both publicly and within prisons, designed to inflict intense pain and humiliation. The repetitive, stinging blows of the whip across bare skin could cause deep lacerations, extreme blood loss, and lasting scars, both physical and psychological. Often a precursor to more severe torture, it served to weaken the body and spirit, making victims more amenable to confession. It was a visceral display of authority, stripping the victim of their dignity and reducing them to a screaming, bloody mess for the entertainment or moral instruction of onlookers. The use of hot pincers or tongs to tear flesh from the body was a particularly gruesome method, reserved for the most grievous offenses. This excruciating process, often performed publicly, involved seizing and ripping away pieces of flesh, creating immense pain, blood loss, and permanent mutilation. The sight and sound of flesh being torn from bone, coupled with the victim's screams, were intended to strike fear into the hearts of any potential dissenters. It was a terrifying spectacle that highlighted the medieval justice system's capacity for extreme barbarity and its desire to instill absolute obedience through pain. Head crushers, as their name suggests, were designed to slowly and agonizingly crush the skull, forcing the brain out through the eye sockets and ears. This horrifying device applied pressure to the head with a heavy screw, breaking teeth, crushing jawbones, and eventually obliterating the cranium. The slow, inexorable destruction of the most vital part of the body created an unbearable, escalating torment, guaranteeing a confession or an agonizing, grotesque death. It was a brutal end, a complete annihilation of the individual, showcasing the extreme sadism that could manifest in the pursuit of justice. The Skeffington's Gyves, or Scavenger's Daughter, was designed to compress the body into an agonizing, curled position, forcing the knees into the chest. This device inflicted excruciating pain by compressing the spine and chest, causing internal bleeding and organ failure. It was the antithesis of the rack, using constriction rather than extension to break the victim, a different path to the same destination of agony and broken will. The profound discomfort and physical trauma, coupled with the extreme claustrophobia, quickly led to total physical and mental collapse, ensuring confessions from even the most defiant. The boot, or Spanish boot, was another crushing device that slowly pulverized the leg or foot. Metal or wooden plates were placed around the limb and hammered or screwed tighter and tighter, shattering bones and destroying flesh. The slow, methodical destruction of the limb, often resulting in permanent disability or amputation, was a testament to the torturer's patience and the victim's endless capacity for pain. It was a preferred method for extracting confessions, as the pain was localized and could be intensified at will, forcing capitulation through the sheer threat of total bodily destruction. The use of hot oil, molten lead, or boiling water poured onto the victim was a truly barbaric form of torture and execution. This excruciating method caused catastrophic burns, stripping away skin and muscle, and leading to an agonizing death by shock, infection, or immediate tissue destruction. Often reserved for coin forgers or those guilty of severe crimes, it was a terrifying public spectacle meant to demonstrate the absolute wrath of the law. The horrifying sight and smell of burning flesh, coupled with the victim's screams, served as a potent, indelible warning to the populace, reinforcing the brutal realities of medieval justice. The saw, a simple yet utterly horrifying instrument, was used for a particularly gruesome form of execution, often reserved for those deemed to be the most heinous criminals or enemies of the state. Victims would be hung upside down and slowly sawn in half, starting from the groin. This inverted position ensured that blood rushed to the head, keeping the victim conscious for a prolonged period, maximizing their agony. The slow, tearing agony, limb by limb, was a truly unimaginable horror, a public spectacle designed to instill unparalleled fear. It was a deliberate, drawn-out act of total annihilation, leaving an indelible mark of terror on any who witnessed it. The practice of flaying, stripping a person of their skin while still alive, was another unspeakable horror reserved for particularly severe offenses, often as a warning to rebels or traitors. This excruciating process involved slowly peeling away the skin, a deliberate and prolonged act of torture leading to an agonizing death from shock, blood loss, or infection. The flayed body, often displayed publicly, served as a chilling deterrent, a gruesome trophy of state power. It was a profound violation of the human form, designed to convey a message of absolute, unforgiving authority, ensuring that the condemned suffered the ultimate degradation in both life and death. The influence of the Inquisition played a significant role in legitimizing and systematizing torture, particularly in cases of heresy. Under the guise of saving souls, the Church employed brutal methods to extract confessions, viewing physical suffering as a means to spiritual salvation. The torturer, often a cleric or official, acted as a divine instrument, convinced of the righteousness of their pain-inflicting acts. This religious justification added a chilling layer of moral certainty to the cruelty, making it even more terrifying for those who fell victim to its relentless pursuit of truth. The executioner, often a feared and ostracized figure, was an integral part of this brutal system, a master of pain and death. Their knowledge of anatomy and human endurance was twisted to prolong suffering, making them both abhorred and essential to medieval governance. They performed their grim duties with a chilling professionalism, often inheriting their trade, becoming the living embodiment of state terror. The executioner was more than just a killer. They were the final arbiter of suffering, the one who translated the cold words of judgment into visceral, agonizing reality, ensuring that the message of power was delivered with maximum impact. Public executions served as grand, macabre spectacles, intended to terrify the populace into submission and reinforce the authority of the ruling powers. These events were not just punishments, but elaborate theatrical performances of state power, drawing large crowds and featuring gruesome methods designed for maximum impact. The fear instilled by witnessing these horrific deaths was a powerful tool of social control, ensuring compliance and suppressing dissent through raw, visceral terror. These spectacles were a calculated display, designed to etch the consequences of defiance into the collective consciousness of medieval society. Hanging, drawing, and quartering was the ultimate punishment for high treason in England, a multi-stage execution designed for maximum suffering and degradation. The condemned was first dragged to the gallows, then hanged until near death, emasculated, disemboweled, beheaded, and finally, their body divided into 4 quarters. Each part of this horrific ritual was a calculated act of terror, performed publicly to ensure the full impact of state power. It was a complete annihilation of the individual, both physically and symbolically, leaving no doubt about the severe consequences of challenging the crown. Burning at the stake, particularly for heresy or witchcraft, was a terrifyingly symbolic and agonizing method of execution. Victims were often tied to a stake with faggots, bundles of wood, piled around them, then set alight, enduring excruciating burns as their bodies slowly succumbed to the flames. The slow consumption by fire, often in front of a horrified crowd, was intended to purge the soul through physical suffering and serve as a stark warning against spiritual deviation. It was a public performance of religious and political power, designed to instill terror and reinforce orthodox beliefs, leaving a lasting impression of the destructive power of divine judgment. Decapitation, usually by axe or sword, was considered a more honorable form of execution, typically reserved for nobles or those of higher standing. While swift, if executed correctly, it was still a brutal and public display of power. The swift, clean cut was meant to signify a degree of mercy, a recognition of the condemned's status, but the sight of a severed head rolling across a scaffold was no less shocking. It was a spectacle that reinforced the social hierarchy even in death, a reminder that while some might receive a quicker end, none were beyond the reach of the sovereign's judgment and the ultimate penalty. The gradual decline of judicial torture began in the Age of Enlightenment, as philosophers and legal reformers challenged its efficacy and morality. Rational arguments questioned whether confessions extracted under duress were truly reliable, and the inherent barbarity of the practices began to clash with evolving societal values. This shift marked a critical turning point, as society slowly moved away from the belief that truth could be beaten or burned out of individuals. The rejection of torture was not immediate, but a slow, halting process, reflecting a profound rethinking of justice and human rights. Despite its official abolition in many Western nations by the 19th century, echoes of medieval cruelty persisted in new forms and in different corners of the world. The legacy of these devices and methods continue to influence interrogation techniques, albeit often hidden from public view and without the overt legal sanction of earlier times. The psychological principles of breaking a person's will through pain, fear, and deprivation, honed in medieval dungeons, found new applications in modern conflicts and authoritarian regimes. The shadow of medieval torture, therefore, stretches far beyond its era, reminding us of humanity's enduring capacity for brutality and the constant need for vigilance against such abuses of power. The terrifying reality of medieval torture chambers reveals a dark chapter in human history, where pain was meticulously engineered to control, punish, and enforce power. These devices were not merely crude instruments, but sophisticated tools of psychological and physical torment, reflecting a profound understanding of human vulnerability. The stories of these brutal inventions serve as a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the enduring struggle for justice and human dignity. Understanding this past, however grim, helps us appreciate the advancements in human rights and the critical importance of safeguarding them against the return of such barbarity. The lessons learned from these instruments of agony underscore the vital importance of human rights and the constant need to challenge abuses of power, ensuring that such horrors remain confined to the darkest pages of history. It reminds us that the pursuit of justice must always be tempered with humanity, and that true strength lies not in inflicting pain, but in upholding dignity. The ghosts of the medieval torture chambers serve as a perpetual warning, urging us to remember the cost of unchecked authority and the sacred value of every human life, a silent testament to the enduring fight for a more humane world.